How to taste bourbon properly. I learned how to do this. This isn't like I've drank 1,000 bottles and just am some kind of an authority on this. I actually used to think people that talked like this when drinking were dorks. And maybe I am a dork. I'm fine with that. Dork in a good way, right? So anyway, let's teach you how to properly taste and kind of how I learned this method so that each of you can do this at home. So before we do that, I highly recommend getting this book. This is how I learned for the most part. Bourbon Curious by Fred Minnick. He's not telling me to do this, by the way. I just learned so much from this book. Check it out. You can buy it on Amazon. Everything you need to know to kind of learn this process, plus just learn a lot about the whiskeys that we drink, is in this book. Number one, analyze the color and the legs, okay? So you'll always see me taking a look at the color. The color kind of tells you, if it's a darker, more amber type color, typically that means it's been in a barrel longer, or that type of barrel could be like a toasted barrel or something like that. So the lighter it is means it's typically aged a lot less. So the color tells you a lot about it. And then the legs themselves, you swirl it around, this does a couple of things. It will build legs on the glass, but it also kind of opens up some of those flavors as well as you're doing this. Get some of that ethanol burn off of there. The legs themselves kind of tell you what the alcohol content. So if you're doing a blind tasting and the legs are like slower, viscosity is slower going down the glass, typically means a little bit more oily, higher alcohol content. Number two, nosing it. So what's the proper way to nose this? I mean, everyone's can be a little bit different, but I say if it's a higher alcohol content, stay a little further back. If it's lower, like an 80 proof or something, you maybe get down in there a little bit closer to smell it a little bit better. But nosing is more, it's just learned behavior over time. They say it's best to nose it with your mouth open as well, which opens up an additional sense. Sometimes they say go on each side of your nose, each nostril, because those are a little bit different too. Some may be more clogged than others. You can do it your own way, but that's just typically how they tell you how to do it. The one thing I love about this book is it has all the different notes in here that you can smell and taste and those different types of things. So train your brain a little bit. If you can't really smell those at first, it takes a while to really develop that skill, that palate on your nose. But I mean, you look in here, there's like cumin, there's floral, there's fennel, there's mustard, there's oak, all these different flavors. There's tons of them in here. Go into your kitchen and pull out some of those spices or those flavors, bottles of syrup, honey, those types of things, and just smell them. Get your nose used to those aromas. You'll be shocked at how quickly you start recognizing those in these glasses. Number three, okay, now the taste. And tasting this is a lot different than, let's say you're drinking this to get hammered or shit-faced. If you're gonna do that, just go ahead and down the hatch. Tasting it wise, I like to take in just a little sip and let it really kind of try to coat your tongue and analyze that portion of it. Your sweet notes typically come out through the tip of your tongue. Your savories are kind of in the middle. The back end is where you taste the spices. So if you kind of let it hold in there, and I like to also see how it just coats my tongue. Some whiskeys will just go straight to the back and be done. Some, the real savory ones, will just really coat your tongue, kind of get that oily mouthfeel. Those are the ones I love. Just analyze all of that. But again, your sweetness is on the tip. Your savories typically are in the middle. And then it finishes with those spices. And sometimes those can linger for 3 or 4 minutes. Again, this is no different than nosing it. So train your mouth to really understand a lot of those flavors that are, in these profiles. Take little bites of things or put little spices on your tongue, whatever. Just, again, you'll be shocked at how quickly you'll pick up on these things. And the best part about bourbon is the way that I taste it can be a lot different than the way that you do. You might pull some notes out of there that I've never even thought of were in there. That's the beauty of all of this. Number 4, experiment. So I like to taste different foods, maybe pair some different foods. There could be some nuts, some chocolate, whatever. It just tends to bring out a little bit more of your senses when you're tasting these different things. Another thing I love to do is taking contrasting types of bourbons and just kind of pairing them, drinking one to the next. One of my favorite things to do is to take something really oaky, for instance, and then move on to like a Jack Daniel's product, because it's an explosion of like banana, a little charcoal flavor in your mouth that you don't get if you just start out with that Jack Daniel's product. So there's a lot of different ways to experiment with it, but again, that just helps train your brain to really pull those flavors out in your own brain. So, and last but not least, just have fun. Drink this stuff with friends, experiment, ask them what they're tasting, or even research it a little bit, and they'll say something that you maybe aren't tasting, and then all of a sudden it triggers something in your brain to look out for that particular flavor. So the more people you're drinking with and talking about this stuff and having that cool experience, the more it's going to kind of train your brain to pull those notes out. So again, I love this aspect of it. I'm not ever saying I'm right whenever I try to do these reviews, but I have trained myself to learn how to do this maybe a sort of a proper way. Check out the book. It's just a fun thing to do. So again, appreciate your guys' attention to these reviews and even your comments, which really help me sometimes taste these a little bit differently. Just a fun community, and cheers. We'll talk to you soon.